So people are pretty creative. I think it's because we are designed and created in the image of our God, who is also very creative. But you see this creativity a lot when you see people sin, right? When we are trying to do something bad, trying to do something against the law, we get very, very creative. A lot of times, the people who are very clever and very creative are crooks. I heard one story. One time, there were three men who were who their plan was to steal this car in front of a house, and so they did. Successfully did. They took the car away. After a couple of days, they actually brought the car back. The car was nicely washed. It was well organized inside, and inside of the car there was a note along with 2 movie tickets, and it said, "We are so thankful that you allowed us to use your car for a couple of days, and so we just wanted to bless you, to thank you with these movie tickets." Now, I don't know what you would think if that happened in your life. If you would think, "Man, that's so sweet. Right? These guys are willing to kind of return my car," and maybe they had this God moment where they just turned around from their sins, and so the owners were like, "Oh man, that's so nice of them. I mean, I'd probably forgive them." And so they went out for the movie, and that's when these 3 men went into the house. And and so you can see how creative, a lot of times we can be, not just people, but we can be when it comes to, sin. In today's passage, you meet a person who the Bible says is dishonest. And at the same time, he's very, very creative. And Jesus tries to draw a lesson out of this man's life. Luke 15, we looked at a passage, a parable that is really, really famous. Arguably the most famous parable that Jesus ever told, the parable of the 2 lost sons. And so we studied those parables, and it's really clear, the point is clear. But in today's passage, when you come to Luke chapter 16, it seems like it's not as clear, it's puzzling. It's one of the most confusing parables that Jesus actually shared. So the setting goes like this. Actually, before we even dive into the story, it's important to notice that at this point, yes, Jesus is still addressing Pharisees, people who are with them, talking about the Father's heart for the lost, principles about God's kingdom. But this particular story, this particular parable is given to the disciples. It says in verse 1, "He, Jesus, also said to the disciples." So after sharing the story of the 2 lost sons to the Pharisees, now he turns to his own disciples to share this simple story. And in this story, you have 2 main characters. The first character is a rich man. It says in verse 1, there was a rich man, and the second character is a manager. Now, this rich man is incredibly rich. If you read his story in this passage, not only does he have a lot of wealth, but he also has a lot of success. He owns probably a pretty big business, and he also invests in other people's business as well. So not only does he have a lot of financial resources, but he's really good at investing these resources to produce more wealth. And so he is so rich that he's at the point where he actually needs a manager, someone who could help him manage all these different businesses and financial resources. So he gets himself a CFO, a chief financial officer, someone who is responsible to take care of his possessions on his behalf. But what we see in verse 1, this manager, this steward, it says, was charged because charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. So we see that this man was dishonest. Something went wrong. Maybe, he was simply lazy. Maybe he was really wicked and he was trying to keep some money for himself. We don't know exactly what is happening. All that we do know is the word wasting is the same Greek word that was used when the younger son went to this faraway country and wasted the father's possessions. So this manager was wasting the owner's possessions. And it was great until he got caught. And so this manager is called into the office. The owner talks to him. It says in verse 2, "What is this that I hear about you?" I thought we were in good terms. I thought I could trust you. But it says, "Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager." turn in your account. In other words, like close the books. You're not working in this company anymore. You're fired. And so literally, this guy gets fired on the spot. He just has a couple hours to kind of get his stuff, to kind of, make sure that all his accounts are clean and to return anything that belongs to the owner. And so he has to pack his belongings and pretty much get out. And you know that this man is in the wrong because there's no sense of guilt in this story. It doesn't seem like this man is remorseful or sorry for what he did. It says in verse 3, when he walks away, he has these thoughts to himself. He speaks to himself in verse 3. It says, "What shall I do since my master is taking the management away from me? Man, I'm in big trouble. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg." So this man understands that he needs a plan. And he's been on this desk job for a while, and so he doesn't think that he has the strength, the energy to go out and actually do some manual labor. He's too prideful to beg for money. And so he's thinking to himself, like, how do I somewhat live a decent life after I get fired? And finally, in verse 4, he comes with this incredible solution. He says, I finally understand what I need to do. It says in verse 4, I have decided what to do so that when I am removed from management, which is a couple hours later, people may receive me into their house. So his plan, whatever it is, he's going to do something to prepare himself for the next life. He knows that this job is coming to an end, and therefore he needs to prepare for the life after this firing. And what he does is quite remarkable, quite interesting. He calls everyone up, everyone who owes money to the owner, the master, to this rich man, and he talks to them, most likely the clients of the rich man. And the first guy, he asks the question, how much do you owe my boss? And the guy says, well, I owe about 100 folds of olive oil. And so that was about 900 gallons of olive oil. Some people would say that it's about 3 years worth of wage, an average salary of a worker. It's about 3 years worth of that. So maybe about 200K that he owes. And the manager says, well, let me cut that in half. Like, bring your paperwork quickly. I can just tweak some stuff and I can just cut that in half. And the other guy would be like, man, really, you would do that for me? And he's not believing this. Like, he's like, how would someone do something like this? Like, that's a big amount. And he says, man, you're doing me such a big favor. You don't know how strangled I was financially. If you ever need something, make sure you come talk to me. I'll take care of you. Like, if you ever need a place to stay, you are always welcomed at my home. And he goes to the next guy. Well, what about you? How much do you owe? And the guy says, well, 100 measures of wheat. And again, that's a pretty significant amount of wheat. And the manager says, well, take this, take out 20% of that. Just only pay back 80 measures of wheat. And so he does this on and again. Like, he hits every client that the owner has. And he's like cutting all these debt. And why is he doing this? Well, it's because he's making friends in the process. He's thinking about what he's going to do after his life. He knows that he can't take anything that the master owns. And therefore, he needs people who can take care of him. Most likely, he was living on the master's property. So he literally needs a house right away once he has to walk away from the master. The only problem is that this rich man finds out about this manager, like how sneaky, how shrewd he has been. And this is where the story gets really, really interesting, because you would think, man, this guy went from a bad money manager to a wicked money manager, to an awful money manager. This guy is literally just abusing the owner's money to gain something for himself. Literally millions of dollars he's taking away. And what we see in verse 8 is remarkable. It says, the master, the rich man, commended, not condemned, commended the dishonest manager. He applauded the dishonest manager, praised the dishonest manager. And the question is, what is going on? And it's more troubling when you understand that this is not just a real story. This is a story that Jesus came up with. Like, Jesus himself seems like he's commending this dishonest manager. So how do we understand this? It says in verse 8, the master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. So the reason why this dishonest manager is being praised, is because he was crafty, he was savvy, because he was actually clever and wise. Now, people try to give a very negative connotation to that word. If you look at it in the Greek, it's literally actually a positive word. It's like this man was actually very clever, very smart about this. And because of this, some people actually try to make this figure in this parable a very ethical figure. Meaning that, okay, now we know what's going on here because it was the rich man who commended this guy. Most likely, the rich man was charging high interest. And the amount that was taken off of their debt was actually not the original amount that the rich man lent, but the interest that piled up. And according to the law, the Jewish law, it's actually unethical for you to charge that type of interest. And so some people believe that this manager was going around just fixing things, and so he just corrected the amount, what they originally owed. Some people actually believe that, because he was a manager, he probably received some sort of commission from each person, each business partner, and so he's basically taking off of his own share. Like what he should have received as his commission, he was just saying, oh, you don't have to pay that. Now, those are great ways to try to explain and defend the character of this dishonest manager. The only problem is that the Bible doesn't. The Bible doesn't seem to defend the character of this dishonest manager because it literally says this manager was dishonest, right? It doesn't say that this was a pure, holy manager. It says this man was a dishonest manager. He was caught wasting his owner's money. He didn't apologize once to his owner. All that he did was he thought about himself. He abused the owner's money to prepare a life after. And for some reason, the master gives props to him. And so how do we understand this? Well, the manager definitely accomplished what he wanted, which he had a lot of friends now, that after the afterlife, the life after his firing, that he could go and rely on. But look at verse 9, it says this. This is Jesus trying to really get to the point, the heart of this parable. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. So there are some things that we should learn from this dishonest manager and some things that we shouldn't learn from this dishonest manager. Again, Jesus is not saying that everything about this manager was great. No, he's saying that, no, this man was wicked, dishonest, wasteful. But there's one thing, out of all those things, there's one thing that you should learn, even from this dishonest manager. It's the fact that this man, when he was in trouble, instead of complaining, instead of being ignorant of his problems, he prepared for his next life. And if people who have unrighteous wealth know how to prepare for their future, how much more should sons of lights, for the people of God, should you prepare and receive yourself into eternal dwelling. Prepare and invest in people so that you can be received into eternal dwelling. So that's really the point of this parable. The only thing that we should learn from this dishonest manager is this. We should use our current life and resources wisely to prepare for our next life. We should use our current life, our resources wisely to prepare for our next life. I just want to draw out 3 simple principles about wealth when it comes to God's kingdom. The first one is this. God over and over again reminds us, especially in this parable, that our wealth belongs to him. That we are not owners of our stuff, but we are stewards of his grace. We are not owners of our stuff, but we are stewards of his grace. Now, I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about knowledge, energy, talents, health, time, anything that you have in your life, your physical body, all those things are actually given to you by God. Yes, you were born with a body, but where did that body come from? Who allowed, simply your body to grow in such a way? You might say, well, the knowledge that I have, I worked hard for it, but if you track back, who gave you that brain? Who gave you the opportunity to actually learn things, to give you parents to support your learning? It's all by God's grace. And this is why King David, towards the end of his life, as he's declaring to his people, this is what he says about his possessions. First Chronicles 29, 10 to 13, it says this. Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of Israel our Father, forever and ever. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. For all that is in the heavens and in the earth is yours. This is coming from King David, who owns a lot of stuff. But he says, Lord, this all belongs to you. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. In your hand are power and might, and in your hand it is to make great and to give strength to all. And now we thank you, our God, and praise your glorious name. David makes it very clear, and Jesus makes it very clear in today's passage, that we are not owners of our lives, but we are stewards of God's grace. I think this is really finance 101 when it comes to God's kingdom. If this is true, if you don't own your stuff, then you don't have the right to decide where to use your stuff, that you need to use it in a way that's in line with your owner, which is God. You know, my first job as a teenager was CVS. I would have loved to give discounts to people or just, hand out inappropriate things to my peers when I was still in high school. But I couldn't. Not only was it against the law, it was against the owner's will. If you work for someone, you can't just do whatever you want to do. If you're the owner, you have that flexibility. But especially if you're a manager, you have to understand exactly what your owner wants from you, and you need to execute that. I think if you have this mindset that you're the owner of your stuff, you're always going to do what's right in your sight. If you have the mindset that God is the owner of my stuff for a season, for this lifetime, God simply gives me these things so that I can steward his grace, just like we see in the parable of the talents. So some people he gives 10 talents, some people he gives 5 talents, some people he gives 1 talent, but at the end of the day, he still gives us an opportunity to work on what he has given us, that we would give an account to what we did in our life with all that he has given us. It means that he is the owner of all our stuff. And so we can't act as if this belongs to us. Our life belongs to us. We have an owner. We have a Lord who knows better than us. So our wealth, it doesn't belong to us. Principle number 2, our wealth will be taken away. Our wealth will be taken away. Notice that in this parable, it was a reality that the manager was going to get fired. He literally just had a short period of time to kind of finish his current job. And in the same way, what the Bible reminds us time and time again, and that this next life, this afterlife, is not just a possibility, it's actually a reality. And it's a reality that might hit sooner than you think. You might think, I have a lot of time. Now, this dishonest manager could have thought in the same way and just live as if there's nothing wrong. But the truth is, our time is up. Like, our time is short. There's not much time for us to use the resources, the connections that we have right now. And so we can't act as if there is going to be eternity in this life. Especially the younger we are, the more that we think that way, the older we are, we realize, yeah, it's absolutely true. The end is near. But it's just a matter of who goes first. Every single person here today will one day die. And the truth is, we will never be able to take our stuff here, what we accomplish here, to our next life. And so our wealth will be taken away. We didn't bring anything in this earth, from our mother's womb, and we won't carry anything to this next life. And if these 2 principles are true, if God is the owner of our stuff and this life is going to end pretty soon, the last thing that we need to know is we need to be wise and plan for our next life, which is eternity. Plan for our next life, which is eternity. We need to be wise when it comes to this. Now, a lot of financial advisors are going to say wise investment looks into not next year, 3 years after, but 30 years. Like, you're investing in something that is going to give you a great return, not just in the short period of time, but down the road, in the long run. That's wise investment. And God is saying that's absolutely true, but take it another step. Don't just look long-term, look at eternity. That's what he's saying. In verse 9, when it says, and I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. The unrighteous wealth, it simply means worldly wealth. Wealth that we have in this life. It's, again, we talked about how it's not money itself that's unrighteous, but a lot of times money is used in an unrighteous, selfish way. And what God is saying is, if you have that money, don't just use it on yourself, but use it for eternity. And he says in verse 8, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. So Jesus himself says, people who are not followers of me, unbelievers, are actually wiser when it comes to money. Like sometimes when you follow Jesus Christ, you become very naive about money. Like you might think, well, I'm never going to be able to take anything in this life anyway, so why bother? Why try hard? Why even study? Like one day I'm going to stand before the Lord, therefore like let me just live life whatever. Like there's no meaning, no person, no passion. You just feel indifferent about your life. You know, for some people, that you become so tied up to money, thinking that all that you have is everything that you have right now. Like, you know, everything that you possess in this life is it. And we can't go to either extremes. God is reminding us, yes, all that we have right now is absolutely real. Those are things that are given to us by God, but it's not there so that you can simply enjoy your life. Yes, he gives us as a blessing, but mainly he gives us those things so that we'll be a blessing to others. He's encouraging us to be resourceful, thoughtful, and shrewd when it comes to money. I don't know how many of you read the newspaper. How many of you check the stock market? Some people think, well, that is unholy for a pastor to check the stock market, to think about finances. Well, I think the Bible reminds us, that God, Jesus himself reminds us that no, sometimes we need to be very shrewd about money. Have you ever talked to those people who are really into finances or investments? They know their stuff. They listen to all these podcasts, read all these books. They have debates within themselves. Is it better to invest in a house or to mutual fund or all these different things? Like, how can you create the most passive income so that you don't have to do anything? How can you set yourself for not just success, but generational wealth? All those things are out there. And people who study these things, they are so passionate, determined, because they are determined to do something about their lives, to prepare their lives towards the end. Once they don't have the strength, the energy to work, they want to make sure that they have enough to enjoy life. And I'm not saying that that's how we ought to live, but I think there's something that we ought to learn about that. If they are that passionate about the end of their life, how more should we be passionate about our next life? Like, we just think about, yes, next life is coming, so whatever. No, like Jesus is saying that as people would prepare their later life and with such passion, with such wisdom, do you prepare and think about the gospel? Do you prepare for your next life? Do you think about the advancement of the gospel in such a shrewd way, in a wise way, in a passionate way, in a creative way? This guy in today's parable was so creative when it comes to how he would prepare his next life. Are you creative when it comes to the gospel, to reach people? Or are you just saying that, oh, well, if someone shows up in my door, I'll probably share something. But outside of that, I'm not going on my way. It's because I think we feel too comfortable. And we think that this life is going to last forever. While the truth is, we don't have much time. And the wise thing to do is to use the resources that we have to prepare our next life. Now, if you think about it, this guy, this dishonest manager, it's really a picture of who we are. You know why? Because every single one of us today, we have mismanaged the resources that God has given us at some point. We have mismanaged the time that God has given us. We have mismanaged the money that God has given us. We have mismanaged the health that God has given us. We have mismanaged the relationships that God has given us. Somehow we used it in a wasteful way. We are absolutely deserving of to be fired in this life. That if God says, hey, your life is going to end today, we have nothing to say. Our time is up. Every single person is going to experience the result of sin, which is death. But there is something that you can do while you're still there, caught in the middle, where you know your time is going to end soon, but you still have an opportunity. What God is reminding you is you might be this dishonest manager who is misusing, abusing all the things that God has given you. But if you're using that for people, if you're using that to lead people to Christ, I'm okay with that. Like, what we're doing really in this life is we're taking the wealth that belongs to God and we're trying to do things for the kingdom of God. And a lot of times it's driven by our selfishness and our self-interest. But the truth is that there's one thing that God is commending into this passage is thinking about the afterlife. Now, I'm not saying that we should break laws and go out of our way to make things happen. I think people often misunderstand this parable, and they say, if it's for the sake of the gospel, anything is okay. Like, if I'm going on missions, doesn't matter what the country laws are, let me break every law to reach a soul. No, I don't think that's true. Now, I think there's a lot of wisdom that is required of that, but God clearly commands us to obey the law, obey your authorities, right? I don't think that's really the point in all of this. He's not commending the dishonesty or the breaking of the laws. I think we should try our best, yes, to be moral people, but also to be loving people because at the end of the day, what's going to last in our life that we're going to see in the next life? It's not your wealth. It's not your time. It's people. People are the best investment that you can make in this life. How much are you investing in people rather than property, rather than prosperity? God is simply reminding us, starting from Luke 15, that his heart is for lost people. His heart is for the broken people. The Father's heart goes out for people and rejoices when people return back to him. And in Luke 15, it was all about the Father's heart for people. Luke 16 is all about what we can do for people, knowing that God has given us more than enough to make an impact on this world. And so, be shrewd like the sons of this world, but don't be wicked like the sons of this world. Let's do better. Let's be savvy and wise and clever and creative with the opportunity that we have. Past week I was able to do a college visit at UVA, and I was talking to our college students, and we were just simply asking, hey, what do you have going on in the summer? Like, how are you going to enjoy your summer break? And all of them are saying, well, I have an internship lined up. I was like, what, internship? Like, or I thought, at least I thought like it used to be like summer job, or like I'm just trying to get some money to have allowance, but it's more like, no, internship. And I was like, why are you guys so obsessed with this internship? It's like, no, if you don't get an internship in the summer during college, you're never going to get a good job. I'm like, man, you guys are really smart, like very wise. In college, I thought it was all about enjoying that life. But you guys are preparing the life after college. But here's the problem. Are you preparing for the life after that? Are you preparing for a greater life in eternity? I'm not saying that it's bad to have an internship. I think it's a great thing to think about your life and plan out your life in the long run. But do you have a plan for eternity? As much passion and as much investments that you make for your next life, or for your life after or later, we should be ready and prepared to do whatever it takes to invest in what's going to last forever. And so God is calling us today to have his heart. And why would you have this heart? It's because Jesus Christ himself came down, emptied himself to the point of death, went on the cross for the good of others, for the good of you and me. We received this type of grace where Jesus put people before his comfort, put people before his possessions, put people before all that he had, and therefore we too do that because we are recipients of that grace. In a practical way to this week, don't overthink. I'm just going to give you one assignment. Connect with one person, one lost soul. It could be a simple conversation. And while doing so, use some of your possessions, right? You don't have to go all out, but maybe provide a hot meal, a warm cup of coffee. Like, try to see what would happen. Instead of telling them, you pay, I'll pray. No, just try to encourage them to really love on them so that they would not only hear the gospel message, but experience the gospel love. Amen? Let's pray.